My name is Tanida Mullen, and I am a savvy young professional. I'm here to help you become the savvy young professional that I know you are. And the way that we do that here is we talk with experts from different fields, different backgrounds, and we get the goods, the juice, the info to help you level up. And today is no different. Today on the show, we have Gina Trimarco. She is from the company Gina and Company. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about how you turn something around that doesn't necessarily go the way you want it to. So, how to turn a loss into a win. If you want to know more, if you think this is you and you want to turn a loss into a win, make sure you stay tuned. All right, welcome Gina to the show. How are you doing today?
I am awesome. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, I'm doing good. Just so you guys know who's listening to the show, we're actually doing a video broadcast, and her office is really fun. So, if I'm pretty sure if you follow her on social media somewhere, you'll get a glimpse of it. Um, but it's been a while since the last time we actually seen each other, and I really wanted to talk to you today about kind of bouncing back from situations. I know that you have a really amazing story to tell, but before we get into that, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. My name's Gina Trimarco. I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Originally from Chicago, born and bred there, but moved to Myrtle Beach about 7 or 8 years ago. I own two companies, Carolina Improv Company, which is an improv theater that has shows and classes for adults, and then Gina and Company Consulting. We do sales training, leadership training, customer service training. I'm a speaker. I go across the country speaking, and we do corporate training and coaching for small businesses.
That sounds really interesting. Actually, sounds fun. So, how did you really get into the improv? That sounds really interesting.
The improv has been in my life for a really long time. I started taking improv classes when I was about 19 or 20 in college. I think it was my freshman year of college. You know, when you're born and raised in Chicago, we'd like to take claim that improv was born there. And when you live in Chicago, improv's on every street corner. So you have to at some point take an improv class. So in college, while I was an accounting major of all crazy things, I took an improv class at Second City to kind of just keep my creative side going. And I'm happy I did it at a really young age, because what it taught me at that young age as a freshman in college was that I didn't have to settle on being an accounting major because that's what my father thought would be the best thing for me. And improv taught me how to be open to ideas and how to say yes to possibilities. And I really found my creative side through improv. So I started with improv at a really young time in my life, and it sort of guided me down a path, not sort of, it really actually guided my entire career path, life path. And 20 years later, because I realized that I like to eat and I like to buy nice things, and being being on Saturday Night Live, which was my dream, I knew it was going to be a really, kind of needle in a haystack. And while that's really possible to go after everything you want, I just was eager to buy things sooner than later. So I always kept improv kind of as a hobby. But then 20 years later, I sort of had a little bit of a midlife crisis. And I'm like, when was I happy? I was really happy when I was doing improv. So let me rediscover improv. And that's a little into what the improv is for me. And then as a result, I ultimately started a business around it 20 years later.
So, improv is a huge part of your life and your success story, you would say.
Yeah, improv is the thread. It is the artery. It is what I breathe and sleep and eat. It is paved the way of my career path, but it's also paved the way of a personal path, because again, like I said, improv is really about being open to ideas, and it really retrains your brain. And keep in mind, we're all wired to improvise. So anytime someone says to me, I could never do that, I could never get on a stage and improvise. Yes, you can. I want to be really clear about that because we are neurologically wired to be able to respond in the moment and listen to things. We just choose to stop doing it. So I use improv as a way to be open to whatever the world throws at me.
Wow, that's interesting. I actually took an improv class. It was probably last year, maybe October, November, in Austin because I'm really, really close to Austin. And I thought about you because I was like, I don't think I would have probably ever thought about doing this had I not, saw your speech and known how much of an impact it's had on you. But it was really interesting because um, I we got there and I was a little late, and they were just like, "Come right on in," and then we started doing some really interesting things, and it was funny because at first you do feel a little uncomfortable, but then like
Mhm.
maybe 2 minutes later, everybody's doing the same thing. They're all laying it out there, so you just feel more comfortable and like this is my team. We are all kind of on the same path here.
You actually really hit it on the head because improv is really about acceptance of others.
It's
At the
it's
end, that's it. It's the foundation.
and it's really interesting. It's really cool if you have a chance to try it. Just try it. There's tons of places that'll let you try one class for free just to get you an idea of what you're doing. But I suggest anybody tries it. But speaking of improv, your situation, your career, how you ended up with your consulting company and all these things happening, had a lot to do with improv. You really did improvise what your situation. So tell us a little bit about how you got into your improv company and also your consulting.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm from Chicago, and I was recruited for a job in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And again, improv really taught me how to see what my talents are throughout my entire career. So I was the general manager of an IMAX theater in Chicago, and I had done a really good job there of making the business profitable and successful. And so I was recruited by another IMAX theater to move to Myrtle Beach to open and launch that theater. And this was in 2007, and I came in May 2007 and really from the ground up had to hire a new staff, had to oversee construction, had to get everybody trained, had to line up all of the vendors, sign all the contracts. I had to literally do everything that you would do in starting up a new business. And it was extremely stressful and very tiring. And I worked 18 hours a day in a new, what I would say, like a new land. I was in the South. I was a northern girl in the South, trying to adapt to a cultural change, to a mindset change on how people think and behave, to just a different way of life, to working all those hours, to not being with my family. So there was a lot of adjustment going on, and I got stressed out pretty quickly. With all that overload, because you have a lot of life changes happening at one time. And I found myself starting to not be the best leader I could be of my team. And I take a lot of pride in being a good leader and bringing a good team together. And so the stress was so overwhelming. I thought, well, what if I go back and take an improv class as a refresher? Because you could take improv classes. Honestly, it's cheap therapy for me. It's like I could take improv over and over again because it's adult playtime. Everybody accepts you. You get to be creative. I'm like, well, if I go back and take a class, that will make me a better boss. But nobody in Myrtle Beach knew what improv was. Like, there were no classes, there was no improv theater, there were no shows. I know a lot of people in Austin in the improv scene, right? It's like you have improv everywhere in Austin, even like, but to be in a place like Myrtle Beach with all these attractions, and there's no improv, made me even more depressed. I'm like, where in the world am I? So I had to literally drive 4 hours away to North Carolina to take a refresher class. And before I did that, I actually hired that company in North Carolina. His name's Zach Ward, and he owns DSI Theater. And I hired him to come and do customer service training with my staff. And I honestly wanted to see what would that look like. Maybe it would be something I'd be interested in doing. So he came in and did that. I pretty much knew. I'm like, this is really what my next path will be when my day at IMAX is over. So I started taking classes with him, studying with him. Things were getting harder and harder at IMAX. The economy was starting to tank. We're going into 2008, and they were putting so much pressure on me and my job that I guess in the back of my mind, I was planning my escape. I was planning my exit plan, and I got so stressed out. And I said to Zach, I said, I think I want to start an improv theater. And he said, I hope your husband makes good money because you're not going to make money doing this. And I was so, yeah, I was so burnt out. I said, I don't care. I just want to be happy.
Right.
So I started making the plan to teach my first class, and I trained with him. And as a marketing person and as a salesperson, I'm like, well, I can't possibly do this without actually having a company name and a website and have credibility and all those professional things you do. So I literally created a website, did all of these things without even having a business while I was still employed, and scheduled my first class, got people signed up for the class, found a place to do it temporarily. And then 1 week before my class started, I got fired.
Wow.
And yeah. And my intention for these classes were just for fun. The intention was to create a playground and playmates because nobody knew how to improvise, so I had no playmates. So the intention of creating Carolina Improv was always as a hobby, and then I didn't have a job. And there I was. And the company was born based on that moment in time, October 26, 2008.
Wow. That is incredible. One of the things that I kind of drew from that story is that even if you are right now, someone's working and they're like, I don't know about this. This doesn't feel right. It's okay to start something on the side. It's okay to actually
Yeah.
start to do something. But even what was interesting about what you said is that even though you were doing something on the side, you didn't treat it like a on the side project.
No.
You did it
Mm-mm.
right. You did the business. You got the websites. You did it as if, not necessarily knowing what the future was going to be of it, but you did take it seriously.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like you want to set the intention that whatever you want to pursue in your life, as small as it is, you need to think big. You need to think big of what if? What if this grew into something? I want to put my best foot forward because you only get that one time to make that first impression.
Absolutely. I believe that too. And so here you are, October 26th. This is okay. You're done with IMAX. That relationship is over. What does it look like going into this brand new thing that you were, yes, working on, but now it's a different story?
It was really scary, honestly, because at that time in our world, everything was crashing around us. Like October 2008 was the worst time for unemployment when people were losing their jobs left and right. And, for a moment, and my husband wasn't working at the time either because he moved with me to South Carolina and we weren't married at the time, but we were engaged. And he was sort of just chilling for a while, and his background and his MBA and his career, like, it was actually really hard for him to find a job in this area. And now we're both unemployed, and it's like, what are the options, right? Like, this is a great fun little hobby, but what are my options really? Can I move back to Chicago? And we toyed with that. And I'm like, all my friends were losing their jobs. I'm like, so in Chicago, I'm like, so what's, now we're going to spend money and pack up and move again. To what? We had nothing to move to. And I continued to look for work. Um, I continued to look for jobs. And so in my mind, I was still, I hadn't fully committed because I'm like, I'm going to find a job. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to find a job. This is going to be fun on the side. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to find a job. And then there was just a moment when I said, and I think at the time I was like 39 or 40. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to make a change, this is the time to do it. Because in my mind, I said, I'll give myself the next 5 years. If I can't make something happen in the next 5 years, I'll still be like 45, and I can still get some kind of job, and I'm not going to be totally, you get to a certain age in your life where, let's be honest, the workforce starts discriminating against you for whatever reason. And white girl at 45, I don't know if I was going to get landed somewhere. So that was in my mindset. I'm like, this is the time to like see what happens. So I just kept pushing forward with it and stayed in the mindset of I'm building my empire.
Yes, and I think that that's definitely a powerful way to think about it because I mean, we all get in those situations where we're like, okay, I see this thing over here. It's calling my name. It's got my name and my first, last, middle name and address written on it, but I'm just like not going to pay attention to it because I think I know a better way. And so I think the big thing that I picked up from that is just that, you have to really to be in tune to what you want to do and just go for it.
Oh gosh. I'm so happy you say the word in tune because I'm so, and I don't call myself a woo woo type of person, but I have embraced the fact that I'm extremely intuitive. And I think for women, and this is one thing I learned throughout my career, I have often, and I'm sure there are some women who can relate to this, in performance views, I would often hear that I made too many decisions or choices based on my gut, and that I needed to change that and be more, numbers focused, fact focused. And I agree with all of that. You should. I mean, I am very much about numbers and strategy and benchmarks and trends. At the same time, 99% of the time, my intuition is right. When I'm in tune to what is feels right, when I make decisions based on that, they work really well. When I make decisions against that, they always go wrong. And I always go, why did I not? Why wasn't I just more in tune and more hyper aware?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do. But it sounds like from your story, once you really get it and trust yourself, then that's when the big things happen. So now you're here, you're doing the improv. You decided this is it. This is what I'm going to take full time. What are some of the lessons or some of the things that you brought into your business from the corporate life that you were able to actually use in your business?
So many things. And that's the beauty about anybody who wants to start a business. And, by the way, I started my first business when I was 23. Accidentally, again, it's for some reason I spontaneously create businesses. I had started like a marketing and television production company in my early 20s. And I actually abandoned it after a couple of years because I felt like at that age I wasn't equipped. And I know the kids today are very savvy, but 22, 23, 24, I didn't feel like I had enough mentorship out in the world of learning things from other people and learning how systems work. And gosh, that is the best thing I could have done was like abandon that and get a job, and learn how things work in corporate because now I can relate to the corporate world. So the things that I brought into my business were accounting, which is ironic because I didn't, I changed my major, wasn't accounting major anymore, but I had to really understand numbers and I had to understand how to read a financial spreadsheet. I had to understand all of that and how to do a budget. So important because everything in a business starts with your numbers. If you don't have that, you're going to fail. Managing people, leading people, hiring people, training people, just to have, and you can be an entrepreneur without a staff, but you still have things to manage. You have clients to manage, and that's an art form. You have vendors to manage, right? Like I outsource a lot of things. I have a graphic artist. I have a virtual assistant. I have you have different people you have to be able to manage. So I learned those skills of what works, what doesn't work. I use my corporate experience in time in the corporate world to take as many workshops and seminars my companies would pay for. what else did I bring with me? Customer service skills, how to take care of customers, sales skills, marketing skills. I mean, just about everything that you need to run a business, which is a lot. And some of us are stronger in some areas and weaker in other areas. You have to have a general foundation and a general idea of all the components so that you can make the business work. And if you're not good in certain areas, you have to recognize that and then know how to hire the right people to do those things.
So let's flip this a little bit. You're talking about what you brought into the corporate world, from the corporate world to your improv business. So what about people out there who maybe haven't had experience with improv, and maybe they are, in corporate world, or maybe they just are starting their business. What can you take from improv to bring into your work life?
Okay, so things that you can take from improv are what I call the softer skills, right? And I think I mentioned this earlier that we are wired to improvise. It is an innate skill. Because, again, you think of the word improv is short for improvisation, is short for improvising. We all improvise every day, constantly throughout the day. Because, even today, I had a certain way I was going to start my day, and it went off track. My Wi-Fi wasn't working, like, things weren't, and I had to improvise, like, okay, which computer am I going to use? Where's my hotspot? We have to be able to think really quickly in the moment. So we're actually wired for that. But we forget to use those. I don't want to even say we forget to use the skills. I think we take those skills for granted, and we forget to to really nurture them and take care of them. So, for instance, another great analogy on that is if you're going to run a marathon, you probably should prepare for it. You probably should, I have a lot of friends who run marathons. Today they're going to run 2 miles. Tomorrow they're going to run 4 miles. The next day they're going to run 7 miles, right? They practice the muscle. They exercise the muscle. So in improv, it's our brain muscle that we need to exercise. And when we exercise that brain muscle, we improve our ability to communicate, specifically to actively listen to people. And when I say actively listen, I say be 100% in the moment with that person. Whether you're on the phone or in person, even right now, anybody who is listening to us, or if you listening to me, you have to be 100% in the moment. I can see, because we're on video, that you are intently watching me versus moving around and doing other things. That happens so much in business that people are not focused 100%. And what happens when people lose focus, like, if I'm not looking at you and paying attention to you, how are you going to feel personally, you yourself?
I would feel like, what's the point? Like, why am I even talking? I would just feel, if you weren't listening, or if I thought you weren't listening, I would just I would feel like, what I'm saying isn't important.
Yeah. And so then how does that make you feel about me?
It would make me feel like maybe your priority list isn't where I am. Like, you have other things going on. You're a busy person, or maybe you just don't care about what I'm saying.
Right. And are you going to easily trust me at that point?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly. So when we do something as simple as just actively listen to someone 100%, be totally in the moment with them, it creates an instant trust. It creates an instant connection. It creates a feeling of. I was at a conference not that long ago, and the woman said to me, we were just chatting at a networking event, and she said, I feel like you're so 100, like I'm the only person in this room right now. That was such an amazing thing for me to hear, because that is what I try so hard to do. If I'm in a one on one conversation with you, I want you to feel like you're the only person that matters at this moment. And the fact that she felt that way created a bond. that if I'm going to call her, we're going to have that instant bond. And how do I nurture that relationship? And maybe she can turn into a client, or she can recommend me, or we could work together, we could collaborate. So improv, when we take improv classes and train in it, helps us improve our listening skills, helps us improve being in the moment, helps us improve thinking really fast on the spot to solve a problem, helps us be innovative and creative, right? You were talking about when you took a class and you entered and everyone's like, come on. It's like, again, it's playtime. And often in the business world, we are not encouraged to be playful. We're not encouraged to be innovative and have ideas. It's like, no, Tanita, this is the way we're doing it. This is the way we always done it. It works. Just put your head down, girl, and do your work 9 to 5, right? And there's no encouragement in a lot of organizations to have that. And when you can have a creative, flexible, innovative work environment, the company is ultimately going to make more money and be more profitable. But they don't see it because they think this is all soft, woo woo comedy. And they're not seeing that it's actually innate skills that we have.
And it sounds like, from what listening to you, that um, maybe, and I ask you this, or I'm saying this because I want people listening to this to really understand, because I think we get kind of caught up in the we have to have this certification and this amount of
Mhm.
sales numbers and this and this and that, and that's what makes me stand out from the thousands of other people that are trying to, get to a certain level in their career or their business. But soft skills are super important, and I want to ask you, why do you think that, even, business owners or, corporations, anybody that has to do with, trying to make a profit, why do you think they put those to the side, or they don't deem them as really important?
I think there's a couple things with that. I think, like I said earlier about my gut instincts, I think organizations there's so much pressure from above, from shareholders, from society of like, what's the return on investment if we make this financial investment? What are the hard numbers? They're looking at facts and figures because there's a predictability to if A plus B equals C, we can get to D. And I think people devalue the soft skills of listening because, like, well, if my employees listen more, how much money exactly in dollars and cents will we make? And so, because there's not that hard fact or that direct line to, we're going to help. When people ask me all the time, like, if we invest in training in you, like, what's the percentage of revenue that will return back to us? It's just a ridiculous question. I have no control over if nothing irritates me more. I could go on a whole tangent. I'm going to come in and do training for your organization. If you don't enforce it, if you don't practice it, I cannot help you make money at that point. I gave you the hammer. If you don't use it to use it on the nail, guess what? You're not going to make any money. You have to use it. So when I get that direct question, it makes me crazy. So I think the hard facts is one. And I think number two, and this has really come to realization for me in the last 6 months in the work I've been doing with clients, people are afraid of emotions. People are afraid of that soft, touchy, feely. I mean, I just created a whole training program on empathy-based customer service because I was working for a medical practice that they had lost all of their empathy internally. And the organization is falling apart because they have no empathy for each other. So if they don't have empathy for each other as medical practitioners, how will they have empathy for their patients? And I think people get afraid of talking about, feelings and emotions. And I think improv is so tied to that because we're asking you to listen to people, to care about people, to be in the moment with people, to try to relate to people. And I think that scares a lot of people, honestly.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think it does too. But, I have experience working for, a company that just lives and breathes culture. And I just couldn't imagine us, or I couldn't imagine having that much success in their brand with that culture and people coming in and wanting to like be a part of that company, without them empowering us to improvise. I mean, because it was a fast paced work environment, and in order to keep the culture and still work as fast as we had to improvise, but we had to be empowered too. So
Bingo.
yeah,
Bingo.
and I
That is a big part of it, and a lot of companies won't empower.
yeah. So, and I believe you, Gina. So, what if I'm maybe a manager, mid level, or maybe I'm not a manager, maybe I'm entry level, and I get it. I went to an improv class or I listened to this podcast, and I'm like, you know what? I understand what Gina's saying, and I want to really do something about this where I'm at right now. What could I do?
Well, when you say I want to do something with this, do you mean I want to do something with improv? I want to do something with moving my life forward? What
I want to do
specifically?
something in my where I'm at, because there are a lot of people that are happy in their what they do on a day-to-day basis, but maybe it's the people around them or the culture around them that's not
Mm,
as, not as inspiring. So how can they be the change?
sure. It really is go take an improv class somewhere. Seriously, go take an improv class somewhere and be in an environment of like-minded people who have all come together for probably similar reasons to improve their skills, to be around people who are going to support them. And when you're in that environment and you practice in that environment on a regular basis, it's going to change your demeanor, your attitude in general. And you're going to take that back into your environment. And let's say you're taking it back into maybe a toxic environment where they don't care about culture. People will notice your change. And as human beings, we have a tendency to mirror. So if you want people to mirror a more positive environment and positive change, you do have to be, you know, you do have to be the change.
Absolutely.
Somebody has to do it. And I said this recently with this medical practice. They literally asked me at the end of their training, someone, and I was so happy she did this because they were broken. They were so broken. And finally, this woman said to me, because I said, what are you going to take away? And this one woman said, is anything going to actually change? And you could hear the whole group went, you could hear the gasp of 70 people. And the medical director jumped up and said, I don't think Gina can answer that question. I said, oh, no, 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 no. No, I want to address it. And the woman who asked the question, I said, what is your name? And she told me her name. And I said, I just want to applaud you because you just said what everybody in this room is thinking. I said, so bravo to you. Awesome question. So let's address it. And, the CEO's in the room. I'm like, this could be career suicide for me right now. But I literally was like, and I abandoned my curriculum. There's an example of improvising. I abandoned my curriculum because they were in so much pain. What they needed was a talk session. And I said, let's talk about this. What would change look like for you? What would that change be? I'm like, I have a marker, we have a flip chart, let's write it down. And we literally went into a session of writing everything down, what would change look like. And I'm like, that's great, now we know what we want, but I'm going to walk away, and what are you going to do about it? And now, what are your bosses going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Because while your bosses are responsible and they are the leaders, they might not be the best people in their jobs, and they might not be the best leaders. And when that happens, we have to step up and we have to be the leader and we have to manage up to make the change happen. So, what are you going to do to make the change happen? And that's a brave thing to do. But if people want to change their environment to make it a better environment, they have to be part of the solution. And
Yeah,
if the solution doesn't happen, then they have to go and find somewhere else.
that, and I'm happy that you said that. I think I hear tons of stories all the time of people holding on to something because they've been there for so long, and I think that it's really refreshing to hear that there's going to be a time where maybe you just have to make a decision, and it's improv. Sorry, I mean you can't plan every single thing. You can't plan your whole 20
Yeah.
years because you don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen in your career.
Now, and if you can't change the culture and you can't help change the way things are because, there are people above you that stop the change from happening, then you have to change your attitude about it. And in that attitude change, you also need to make a decision. And I said this to a lot of groups I train with. I'm like, if you're not happy here, do everybody a favor and leave. Quit. Go find another job. If this has just become a paycheck, or let's just say you're a business owner and you're miserable. For a time, I was miserable in my business. Like, if you're not happy wherever you are, you need to leave because you're making everybody around you unhappy. So go find something where you're going to want to be there versus just show up for a paycheck, because you're just hurting the organization, you're hurting yourself, and you're hurting your coworkers.
I agree. So that we're nearing the end of the interview, and I have a few more questions that I definitely want to ask you about. One is, this podcast, of course, it's called The Savvy Young Professional, but I can tell you right now, there's a ton of different people that listen to it. I get feedback from all ages and careers and business owners
Oh.
and corporate people. But what are some of the things that you think? Because I know you have a lot of experience with this as a business owner and also having worked, in corporate. What do you think are things that people need to know as they're trying to advance and take it to the next level in their career, no matter what they're doing?
I think there's a couple things. If you want to advance your career or you want to advance yourself personally and professionally, there's some simple things like stay on top of what's going on. Listen to podcasts, read books. I mean, I have a ton of books on my tablet, and when I go to the gym, that tablet goes with me, and I try to stay on top of things that are of interest to me and where I want to take my business or where I want to take my career. So stay involved with learning. You should always be learning and finding education. Stay involved with people in general. Expand yourself. Schedule time to talk to different people, learn different things. Get out into your community. This last night I volunteered in my community for an event. It's what to me that was cool because it always turns into networking. I'm like, oh, I need to connect with that woman. And I'm just there to give back to the community, but the community always gives back to us.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I think probably the most important thing is to take care of yourself. Self care, whatever that self care means to you. I see a lot of people burn out in their jobs and burn out in their businesses because, in general, life is hard. We're dealing with, you're married, you're not married, you have kids, you don't have kids, you have parents who get sick, they or not, you have ailments, you get sick. There's a lot of stress on the job. So, what for you is self care? And I coach a lot of my clients, especially my entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, on first things first. Like I did this with a client last week. We did a half day strategic session for her business, and we spent the first hour working on what she was going to do to take care of herself because she had a whole lot of stressful things coming up. And I'm like, if you are not of good mind, body, and soul, you can't do anything else. Like for me, it's going to the gym. It's I'm going to get my nails done today. It's getting a massage. I do meditation. I read. Sometimes I'm like, it's ice cream day. I'm going to get some ice cream. Whatever it is that for you that replenishes you is going to be the foundation to being successful.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And finally, my last question, and I always ask this to every single one of my guests. So, if you knew back then, so whatever back then is for you,
Okay.
it could be 20 years, could be 5 years, but if you knew way back when what you know right now, what would you tell yourself or what would you do different?
What would I tell myself back then? Trying to think of which back when I want to go to. I've had this question be asked of me many times in interviews, and I always want to come up with a new creative answer. And I think I just go back to the same answer is if I knew what I know now, if I knew it then, I would be less afraid. And I'm pretty fearless, but I think we get caught up in fear of making choices and making decisions to move things forward. And now I'm like, nothing scares me. I'm like, I invest in my business, which is a big fear for people, financial investment. Like I have a coach. I buy things for my business. I just bought a new car last week, even though I was like, oh, car payment. But then 3 days later, I landed a new client and I'm like, car payment is paid. So the universe always gives back to me. So that would be my biggest piece of advice to myself, was to not be afraid, because I probably would have advanced quicker in my business and life without the anxiety.
That's pretty powerful, and I hear that, but everybody has a different story of why they feel like they were fearful, or it's a different spin on it. So I really appreciate you sharing that. It actually made me think of this quote that I saw the other day, and I said, wow, I never heard this quote, and I'm a quotes person. Like, I got the sticky notes, I got them all everywhere. But it said to succeed, jump as quickly at opportunities. To succeed, jump as quickly at opportunities as you do to conclusions. I was
Oh,
like, oh, that's good. And it reminded
that's
me of that.
powerful.
I love that quote. And honestly, it speaks to what you were saying. You got to jump to the opportunities, and you can't really jump to the conclusions because the conclusions, before you even know what's going on, is the fear. That is what that is. It's fear saying, this is what's going to happen if you take this
Right,
opportunity. So,
right, right.
well, I thank you so much for coming on the show. One of the things I want to do is make sure that people can contact you and get in touch with you if they're listening to this. They want more, they need to know more about you. Where can they find you?
They can find me at ginaandcompany.com. So that's GINA company.com. Or they can email me at gina@ginaandcompany.com.
Okay, and of course, as always, all this information will be in the show notes. So you can easily click the artwork to the show and find out the links to Gina's information. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I love you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Love you too. Hold up.
Okay.
Wow, what an awesome show today. I really love talking to Gina, and she does not hold back on giving us the information that we need to take it to the next level. If you want to know more about Gina and how to find her, make sure you click the artwork. You'll find all the links mentioned in the show right there in the artwork as you're listening. You can also go to thesavvyyoungprofessional.com, and where you can share this podcast. You can view the show notes. You can listen over and over again and find all the other goodies that we have over there. I want to thank you so much for listening to the Savvy and Professional podcast. Don't forget to email me if you want to reach out to me and you have some ideas for the show, things you want to see in 2016. Make sure you email me info@thesavvyYP.com. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's on your mind, and I want to make sure that we are building a show that is just what you need to take your career to the next level. Until next time, keep it savvy, YPs.